When I was a kid, there was this playground that I would always go to at the elementary school by my house. And as to not go alone, and since I didn't have that many friends anyways, I would take my dog Jake with me. We would run around, play fetch, the usual things humans do with their dogs. Jake and I would just run and run. And him being a young dog, and I was just a child, that's all either of us wanted to do anyways. One day I went to the top of this slide and Jake followed, and he would always hesitate right at the top, completely unsure if he should take another step and if that was in his best interest to do so. I would always vomit words of encouragement to him over and over until one day I just grabbed him and sat him in my lap to go down the slide with me. I pushed away with one arm and I held him with the other and went down, and instantly he kicked with his back legs and leapt from the top of that slide, and time instantly stopped. I watched him leap from the position that I had put him in, and there was nothing I could do about it. Watch him fall until he hit the ground with what seemed with all of his weight onto his right paw. I finished coming down the slide to the sound of him yelping in pain, staring at me like, "What the fuck did you just do?" And I was young and I wasn't the strongest kid, and Jake was big enough now that I couldn't carry him on my own. So I told him that I'd be right back for whatever that was worth, and I ran. I ran faster than I ever had. And the sound of him crying was growing distant, and as all I could hear was the sound of my shoes smacking the pavement at such a fast pace that I couldn't tell which foot was making the sound. I burst into the door and probably terrify my mom because at that point I'm out of breath and I'm on the verge of tears. And I tell her what had happened and she gets into the car, but I'm already running back to Jake before she even leaves. I get back to him and try to comfort him, petting him and telling him that I'm very sorry. And his crying fades to a minimum and my mom arrives and picks him up and takes him to the car to go home. He had sprained his leg pretty bad, and I was always so thankful that he hadn't broken his actual leg. I wouldn't leave his side over the next few days, and I would be reminded of how stupid I was every time that I would see him hobble around and not be able to use his leg. I'd never forget that face that he gave me that day as I reached the end of that slide. But now years pass, Jake gets older, and I get older. Religious issues with my family get in the way of myself and my parents. Jake gets older, and I get older. Communication with my parents is little to none, meaning that I can't see my best friend, the one who was always there when I had no one, and the one who'd always listen to me talk. And he gets older, and I get older. One day I get a call from my parents. Jake isn't doing too well, and we think it's time to put him down. So I head to my parents to see my friend for the first time in years. And honestly, I don't know if he even recognized me, and I'm not even sure if he knew where he even was. He was an old dog now, and he was probably the age of 12 or so. We didn't really know exactly what his age was when we got him, but he could barely stand, and it was clear that he was blind. His head would just move back and forth, and his nose would twitch, just scouting, trying to make sense of this world around him. My parents tell me that they will take him to the vet the following day to have him put down. His quality of life was garbage, honestly, and he could barely move. He was blind, he couldn't control his bowels, and he was an old dog, but he lived a great life. So I understood. The next day I go with my parents to the procedure, and Jake's nose is twitching violently, trying to make sense of his surroundings. I hug him tight and I thank him for everything that he's done for me growing up. Every time I needed someone to talk to, every time that I would have him in stupid videos that I would make with my dad's camcorder. The doctor comes in and everything is becoming a reality now. My dad helps the assistant hold Jake as the doctor injects the needle into his veins. Within seconds, Jake moans, and I see him open his eyes to give us all one last look before he goes. Him and I lock our eyes together, and I'm instantly transported back to the time that I was a kid reaching the bottom of that slide. This is a feeling that I could spend years trying to explain to someone, or try to write down, and I'll never be able to explain just what him and I were feeling in that moment. And it's very cliche, but that moment lasted forever, but at the same time it ended too abrupt. My parents say their goodbyes and leave me in the room alone with them, and I pet his head and lay my head onto his body. I thank him again for everything and apologize about the time I let him slip away from me on the slide. I tell him that I love him and that I'm sorry I wasn't able to be there for him over the years. I place his head over his paws in between and give him a kiss on the forehead before leaving. I continue to look into the room as the door closes, as if this last glimpse will make up for the years I hadn't been able to see him. The door shuts, and I get older.